Under a shocking new plan scheduled to be adopted next year, all it would take is some sort of a major global shock for the United Nations to literally take authority over the entire planet. Hello, I'm Mike Bain from Christian Voice New Zealand. Join me as I investigate how the United Nations is preparing emergency powers to set the stage for a global government and why Christians are looking closely at the initiative. The need for the United Nations to have emergency powers adopted is all part of a bigger agenda, and I'll come to that soon. But as friends do, they often ask me to watch a video, and I always do, and then give them feedback, good or bad, as to what I thought. Which reminds me to ask you, watching, help us out occasionally by sharing our videos from time to time, especially if you agree with the message. But last week, among the 15 or so videos I received, one was called Messiah 2030, which incidentally is 2 hours long, just saying, but it was jam-packed at looking at differing prophecies to back up the producer's conclusion that Jesus will return in 2030. I hope he's right. However, my friend who suggested it to me felt the dates given are wrong, which after watching and thinking it through, he was right. But it did lead me down the rabbit hole to speculate, what if the producers of Messiah 2030 were correct? It's hard not to deny we're living in the time of the end, and even I've encouraged you to share that belief. But in line with Matthew 24, no one knows the hour, not even the Son of Man. But if 2030 is accurate, expect to see some real change in the world before the end of this year. It's likely we'll see the establishment of a new order, a one-world government, and the identity of the Antichrist. By man putting a date on the return of Jesus, one of three things are going to happen. First of all, people are going to roll their eyes, they're going to scoff at your lunacy of your statement, and they want to have you committed, along with our dear old friend Harold Camping, who suggested earlier in the century such a thing would happen, and then he changed the date. The other one is expectation grows wildly among the followers of the Bible, and they start to imagine it could really happen. And they'll encourage one another to kind of look busy because Jesus is about to return, or others like me will prefer to look closely at the prediction and say, it's all in God's time, and continue to believe and work by telling others that they can be saved. But for some time now, I've spoken about the pathway the world is on with the agendas of both the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and the World Health Organization. So let's add into that mix the European Council, soon to become the European Government, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc., etc., etc. But let me also throw in a couple of other organizations: the Catholic Church, the Church of England, and the World Council of Churches. Why is it, you may say, are we hearing more talk about the end coming? Well, just look at the agenda. Look at who it is that's in control and what it is that they wish to achieve. Now, back in January, I highlighted many steps which are being taken under the guise of the Great Reset. A one-world government can only be achieved if the people it wants to control allow them to do it. In other words, if those who want it can have the same confidence that Adolf Hitler had in the lead up to his reign to manipulate the hearts and the minds of those they need to control. The controls put in place recently under the facade of COVID showed us and them we will meekly accept a change in status and sovereignty. It's coming. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Change is coming, literally. It'll be like a thief in the night, and it's coming so fast you won't see it. Like the COVID restrictions, you'll wake up one morning and the world you once knew will be no longer. Just recently in the United States, Justin Haskins, who's a research director at the Heartland Institute and New York Times, best-selling author on Independence Day, unleashed a warning to Americans that they may soon be losing their independence. He wrote of the agenda laid out at the United Nations September Summit of the Future. It might be the biggest attempted power grab in the history of the United Nations. If approved, he says, the United States as we know it would cease to exist. Now, while Haskins writes about the effect that such a pact for the future would have on the United States, one cannot dismiss the impact it would have on New Zealand and the rest of the world. I've mentioned this before, but among the radical proposals being suggested, underlying is the World Health Organization plan for a new emergency platform, a stunning proposal to give the United Nations significant powers in the event of a future uninterpreted global shock, such as a black swan event like the worldwide pandemic, a major climatic event, maybe a global digital connectivity disruption, or maybe a major event in outer space. What aren't they telling us? But the thing about a black swan event is that these are now commonplace rather than a rarity. And this summit will mark the halfway point to the deadline set for achieving the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. This will be the centrepiece of the high-level week of the General Assembly of the United Nations. It will respond to the impact in multiple and interlocking crises facing the world, with an expectation to reignite a sense of hope, optimism and enthusiasm for the 2030 Agenda. The illustration, much like a picture of a Big Mac, looks appealing until you open the box and find expectation and reality are different and unpalatable. And this summer, we're less than 7 years from 2030, and the UN wants to remind global leaders to keep implementing that 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. On the surface, the goals that the UN wants to achieve sound rather harmless, but if you dig into the details, you'll find that the 2030 Agenda and Sustainable Development Goals are just a blueprint for creating a far-left globalist utopia. So let me recap some of the points I made in an earlier presentation. If New Zealand or any other country signs this pact, then it forfeits its sovereignty to the United Nations. Can you now see the agenda being carried out towards a one-world government? But as I say in all good commercials, but wait, there's more. Add to this the world economic downward spiral. Soon you won't need money because you'll have none. And already what you have is not available to you, with New Zealand banks placing limits on the amount of cash that you can withdraw at once. You're hearing the term centralised banking system. That's because New Zealand is currently working its way to bringing it to fruition. And I refer you back to the Great Reset series we produced earlier this year. And if you've ever wondered why it is our government is so down on our farmers, have a look at what's happening overseas to thousands of farms across Europe to meet climate change goals. Now, this is all happening during a worldwide food crisis, and so it goes. As many of those in power coerce us into fearing for life every day, fearing for our homes, our planet, and our future, but hey, most of you don't realise it's happening simply because no one, not even our government, nor the mainstream media, are talking about it. But what's the reason for all this coming to fruition? It's this. Revelation 12 verse 9 talks about the great dragon being hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan. You've probably heard of him. Now, he leads the whole world astray, according to Revelation. He was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. I said earlier, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything, but ask yourself and be honest. Since 2019, we've seen the world change, and ask yourself, is it any better? Can you afford today what you could yesterday? When I get sick, will someone take care of me? And why is it that my children are as confused and frightened as I am as we move forward? The clouds and darkness enveloping this world are here as each day grows darker. I tell you this, that despite the date, predictions of the Messiah 2030 are correct, and the day of redemption, the day of the Lord, is close. But before that, are you ready to accept that this world is heading towards an even darker time in history? Back in 1933, no one could have foreseen how one man in power could change the landscape of Germany. But he did, and during that time, many were looking towards a saviour. My friends, we're in a similar time, but can I assure you this? It'll be unlike any other time in history. Following the darkness, all will look up to the clouds, and they'll know that their redemption is near, as the Bible foretold, as the Son of Man, the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, will return to the earth. But I'll leave you with this one thought about the things I spoke of. These things must happen, and as Jesus assured his disciples, see to it that you're not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come.